Okay. So I'm Shauna Concannon, and today I'm going to be presenting work that I completed while at Newcastle University Open Lab with my colleagues Madeline, Balaam, Rob Coma, and Emma Simpson. Oh, sorry. 1 second. Okay. No, okay, not mirroring, sorry. Sorry. Yeah, that's what I'm just doing, sorry. Okay, and we'll try that again. Okay. So in this talk, I'm going to be talking in particular about how we set about developing a hybrid approach for the analysis of textual data, and data that is inherently spatial and richly qualitative in nature. It's also data that we had quite a lot of, and so the approach that we wanted to develop was something that was scalable. So researchers in HCI have developed methods for interpreting qualitative data, such as thematic analysis, that attend to social worlds and their complexity and contradiction and seek to understand the lived experiences of participants. However, these don't always translate so easily to large-scale data sets. Quantitative and computational approaches are often better suited at handling large-scale data sets, but are they capable of attending to the nuances of experiential counts of placemaking? So to explore this question, I will present a case study using a geotag data set about the experiences of breastfeeding parents. And I will draw on the literature from Feminist Geography and Feminist HCI to situate and motivate this work. So by talking through how we set about combining computational approaches into a reflective process, I hope that I'll provide a roadmap for other researchers who are exploring similar challenges in their work about how to bring together these qualitative and quantitative methods in meaningful ways. So some of you may already be familiar with FeedFinder. It was presented at CHI in 2015. It's a mobile app that was designed, co-designed with breastfeeding mothers to support positive breastfeeding experiences. Users are able to add venues and places on a map and rate it based on criteria such as comfort, hygiene, privacy, and facilities. And they're also able to leave a textual review. In this presentation, I will be focusing on the textual data that is created in these FeedFinder reviews. The data in FeedFinder is volunteered in a peer support context, rather than being elicited by an official health or government organisation. And this is different to much of the existing research on breastfeeding practices, which tends to be dominated by surveys, such as the Infant Feeding Survey. So what have existing approaches told us about breastfeeding practices? Well, in the UK, breastfeeding rates fall well below the recommended guidelines. It's a high priority for Public Health England. And while it's a personal choice whether a mother chooses to breastfeed her child or not, the concern is that the wrong factors may be governing these decisions and creating an unequal playing field. In 2016, Simpson et al. Conducted a thematic analysis of the FeedFinder data, and they found that privacy was a prominent theme in the reviews. The Infant Feeding Survey also found that fear of breastfeeding in public is actually a major concern for breastfeeding mothers, with a third of mothers choosing not to breastfeed in public, and 1 out of 10 abstaining from breastfeeding altogether because of this fear. Those who do tend to be older mothers, those from less deprived social economic context, who work in professional jobs, and are typically white. But we don't know why, or what can be done about it to better support these parents. So in order to tailor public health interventions aimed at increasing breastfeeding rates in the UK, we need to better understand the demographic differences of breastfeeding parents. But how should we set about doing this? So I'm now going to talk a little bit about feminist perspectives and how and why they might help guide us through this data set and think through a way to analyse it. So geographic information systems support the management, analysis, and presentation of geographic data. They were initially dominated by numerical information and more strongly associated with quantitative geography. Feminist and critical geography, however, are charged with the agenda of exposing the socio-spatial processes that reproduce inequalities between people and places. Feminist and critical perspectives on geographic information systems, therefore, seek to understand ways of working with GIS that explicitly address some of the challenges that have resulted from reducing individuals to these points on a graph, but not necessarily exploring their personal stories. And they strive for new ways for working with spatial data and applying this feminist lens to explore how diverse and varied accounts of place can be understood and represented. Similarly, recent discourse in HCI has brought feminist perspectives to bear upon the theory, methodologies, and practices of interactive systems research, calling for more direct engagement with gender and the development of a socio-technical theory of gender. Bardzell and Bardzell call for the development of methods that represent people on their own terms and resist binary or reductive classifications of the data. So both Feminist HCI and Feminist GIS call for us to allow for complexity and contradiction by finding new ways to represent and explore these multiplicitous accounts within our data sets. So data and methods are not neutral, and the role of the researcher is to be as transparent as possible in navigating this. And both Feminist HCI and GIS have called for the development of mixed methods approaches and hybrid approaches which support dialectical information gathering. There are obviously benefits of quantitative approaches, such as they can describe measurable patterns of complex spatial relations. And they can also be a powerful instrument in terms of initiating progressive and social change. Sometimes it's easier if you have what is called evidence to put it forward to it. It can support arguments and initiating change. So Quan identifies these endeavours as hybrid geographies and approaching the issues informed by critical geographies with quantitative GIS methods. But working out what these hybrid methods should look like in practice can sometimes be a bit harder, especially when we're thinking about it in terms of not necessarily just representing data, but actually doing the analysis and how we be mindful of these concerns. So to take our lead, we need to be mindful of a couple of things. The data that we're using should seek to include diverse voices and create spaces for individuals to speak on their own terms. Volunteered information is, especially with geographic information systems, is seen as more accessible, and it can reconstruct the power relations and lead to a more diverse set of knowledges from diverse groups. So the collection of primary quantitative data over official statistics has often been supported. So the FeedFinder data set that we have goes some way to satisfying many of these concerns. The app is simple to use, users are self-selecting, and they are creating information in a peer-to-peer context. But other than the text that they contribute and the associated geodata of where they're talking about, we don't know a great deal about them. The Index of Multiple Deprivation is a UK government statistical report on relative deprivation in small areas of England. It's based on things such as income, health, education, housing, and it's an official data set that is purely quantitative. And it may only be able to offer a partial view, but we wanted to see, could we develop a method for engaging with it critically, and by positioning it together with our own data set to lead to asking new questions and hopefully new readings of these data. So I'll talk through now how we did this. So topic modeling is a commonly used unsupervised machine learning technique for the automatic description of documents. So a document could be an article, a newspaper article, or in our case, it's our review text. The benefits of this approach is that it isn't labor intensive, and it allows you to explore the perceived distributions of the latent topics within a data set. And for each review, a topic distribution is generated. A topic is described as a set of words with a probability distribution, and the document is as a distribution of topics. So topic models, they have distinctive, it's characterized essentially by kind of co-occurrence of words. So and words, how spatially near they are in meaning. So it looks at the patterns, but it's not mutually exclusive. So a single document can be reviewed, can be represented as multiple topics. So it's not binary, but it does give you an indicator of the different topics that are inherent within it. But obviously, we didn't want to just take this and say, right, we know what the data is doing. We wanted to kind of check that this made sense. So we embedded this within a process where we also conducted a sense-making session. So I worked with other researchers who had worked on the feed finder data previously, and in particular done a thematic analysis, so we're very familiar with the data. And we also did some hand coding to verify that the automatically generated topics reflected our own sense check. We then explored how the distribution of these automatically extracted topics and the hand-coded themes were measured across the IMD index of multiple deprivation quintiles. So this is what you get as an output from a topic model. You get a list of words that are kind of characteristic of that topic. And we see that this is just a selection, it's not all of them, but I just wanted to kind of illustrate how it works. We have a range of different topics such as recreational provisions, welcoming atmosphere, whether there was a separate room for breastfeeding, how clean a place was, and so I was able to pick out relatively nuanced kind of topics, which for an automatic approach is quite promising. But we also see that privacy or private kind of comes across 5 different topics within the data. And in particular, it comes across in different ways. So in the first one, which is privacy and comfort, we see it talking about how comfortable the seating was, but also that it was a private seating area. But in other ones, we see that they're talking about if there's a lock or a partition or a cubicle. So we see these sort of different regions of concern emerging. And when we ran the sense-making session, we kind of talked through this, and it became clear that the concept of privacy was not homogeneous, and the material concerns and affordances that were needed to support individuals' requirements for privacy were not uniform. The material concerns of privacy were distinct, and there were many different factors to it. So in the hand coding, we went through and classified separated out the designated area to reviews and the privacy-related reviews. And it wasn't straightforward, and through the talking, we realized that how we came to think about what privacy was not straightforward, and because something references a designated area, does that mean that it is about privacy, or is it just signposting that it's available, or is it an a priori, I'm looking for a private area? So the index of multiple deprivation, in general, the data set from FeedFinder is about places and venues from a range of socioeconomic contexts, with 23% located within the most deprived quintile and 16% located in the least deprived quintile. So it was from a range of different contexts. And to assess whether the automatically extracted topics related to the socioeconomic factors associated with a given venue, the variation of topic distribution was analysed. And this is what we saw. Reviews, the orange reviews represent the least deprived quintiles, venues that were in the least deprived quintiles. And they were much more likely to comment on how supportive and friendly the environment was, how delicious the food was, the availability of play areas for children, and the levels of comfort and seat quality. The topics highlighted in blue were significantly more prevalent in venues in the most deprived areas. And they were much more likely to comment on the specific feeding area availability and discuss whether there were factors such as whether there was a curtain or a lock on the door. And they also included more spatial references, such as upstairs or at the back, suggesting that it might be signposting and trying to guide people towards these designated areas. In terms of, we validated the automatic analysis against the baseline hand coding, and we find that it was statistically significant in both the hand coding and the automatically extracted topics. So on this little graph, you can see that the gold-coloured bar represents privacy, and you see that privacy is equally common across all factors of society, from the least to the most deprived quintiles. It's a concern that everyone mentions as frequently. But if you look at the orange bar, that relates to designated areas. And quintile 1 is the most deprived areas. And we see that there is a significant downward trend, so people in the more affluent areas are less concerned about the provision or talk less about the provision of designated areas. So our analysis has kind of shown that there are different expectations and experiences of breastfeeding women in the UK, and the influence of socioeconomic status on these expectations and experiences is not inconsequential. So through this work, where have we got? Well, we've demonstrated that approaches such as topic modeling can identify novel and insightful patterns in experiential data and provide an empirically kind of grounded entry point for researchers. This approach facilitated the experiential accounts of place to be brought to bear upon the purely quantitative data. And it enabled us to systematically interpret the impact of material and socio-economic factors on people's experiences and concerns when breastfeeding in public. In particular, it reframes what breastfeeding parents may mean by privacy, and can lead us to think about how we respond to this, or how we could work with local business owners or health organizations to provide more tailored support. So, to conclude, we started out by asking how do we use geographic information systems in this complex HCI context. And I think we've demonstrated how one might set about conducting feminist GIS data analysis. And we position this work alongside other efforts to develop a feminist HCI methodology as it begins to unpick the challenges and opportunities of dialectic information gathering and exploration. And while data sets are often partial and are not perfect, I think, and in the same way that quantitative data analysis is not perfect, sometimes think about how we can go to push them and take them somewhere further and bring together different types of data sets to see if we can lead to more nuanced and insightful readings of our data. I think it's a call for let's do more hybrid work and try and work stuff out together. Thank you.
Okay, one quick, very, very quick question. And while the next person sets up,
yes,
we'll do that. Very quick question. No? Okay.
Only a minor confusion. Hi, Eric Ballmer, Lehigh University. I am fantastically thrilled to see this. I can't wait to read the paper. I want to give you a chance to talk about how you navigated the vagaries of topic modeling, things like tuning your stop word list and choosing the number of topics, and the fact that topic modeling generates different solutions every time you run it in light of this particular feminist critical perspective that you're taking.
Yeah. So, yeah, with topic modeling, I ran it a few times initially. It was me working through it. I started with kind of standard stop words, and actually I think in the end I kept just a kind of a really standard stop word list and didn't go beyond that. And I started with a sort of 10 to see the level of granularity, and saw that it wasn't. And then, so obviously I needed to be aware, and I kept a kind of log of each one so that I had a detail of each output. And as is always the case, I jumped then to sort of 50 topics and got more, but it kind of stopped being meaningful towards the data. So I brought it back to 30, which I thought was a manageable amount that I could also work through with another researcher. Because looking at topic models can be really unintuitive, because it's essentially like a big list of words, and you kind of need to present them in a certain way. And in the sense-making sessions, what I did was I first of all just took reviews and then had the kind of weightings of the topics with me, and we talked through the reviews and what we thought they were about, and then I revealed the topics I had from a 30 output to see which ones they thought associated with them. And then we kind of saw that it separated out these different concerns of privacy, and she was like, oh, actually, I guess it's not this type of one. And so we kind of talked through it. It's difficult with topic models because they are ambiguous and they are messy, and you need to kind of interpret them. But I think there's something really nice about that as well, because it means that you get to kind of question them and go through them. And I think it really sets itself up well for a kind of collaborative approach where it's not just, it's good for kind of a cooperative, computational and human system.